We're having a conversation with Mark Coker and Jim Azevedo. Authors are the new power central in publishing. Oh, yeah. For decades, the world's largest traditional publishers controlled the industry, and they decided who got published, when, and where the books would be distributed. Then came along ebooks, e reading devices, and digital publishing and distribution platforms like Smashwords marked a big change that forever democratized the industry. Now, Smashwords founder Mark Coker and marketing director Jim Azevedo are here discussing that rise in indie publishing and what it was like joining forces with Draft to Digital and why the power center in the industry is shifting away from some of those large traditional publishers and into the hands of you, the authors. Jim and Mark, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Desiree. Great to be
Yeah,
here.
Desiree, it's an honor to be here.
All right, let's dig right into it. Let's go back in time a little bit and talk about Smashwords. What led to the founding of the company?
Well, back in 2005 now, my wife, who's a former reporter for Soap Opera Weekly magazine, and I wrote a novel about the dark underbelly of Hollywood celebrity. And we did what every first-time author is told to do. We did multiple editing rounds. We hired book doctors, editors. We got everything whipped up into shape. We shopped it to agents. We were lucky enough to be represented by Distel and Goderich, one of the top agencies in New York. And for 2 years, they tried to sell our novel to all the major publishers of commercial women's fiction. And for 2 years, they got nothing but rejection. The publishers were reluctant to take a chance on the novel because previous novels that had targeted soap opera fans had not done well commercially. So it was too big of a risk for them to take. But as you might imagine, it was a real letdown for us. It was a heartbreaker to have the doors slammed in our faces. We put so much effort into this book. We just dreamed of seeing it on bookstore shelves. And it became clear that that dream wasn't going to happen. And I thought about it, and I thought, this is not right that a small handful of publishers have the power to determine which writers can become published authors, which writers have access to the printing press, and which authors have access to retail distribution, which is where readers are found. And so my background is Silicon Valley and doing tech startups. And I thought, this is a problem of access that could be solved with technology. And so I, investigated ebooks. With ebooks, there's no paper, cardboard boxes, no fossil fuels to ship them around. You can zap off, the bits and bytes of an ebook anywhere in the world that there's an internet connection. And so I thought, well, what if we could create a publishing platform that would allow us to say yes to every single author in the world? That's what I wanted to do, is just to represent every writer in the world and say, yes, you now have the power to publish like a professional, to distribute like a professional. You have the power to choose your own pricing, your own promotion, your own distribution. It's all you. And so that was the crazy idea of Smashwords that we launched in 2008. And that was an interesting time. We launched the business at a time where nobody wanted to read ebooks. Ebooks represented less than 1% of the market. No one wanted to read self-published authors.
I'm laughing because you say ebooks at the time represented less than 1% of the market. Like, who enters a market when what you're trying to get out there is like less? I think it was like 0.5%, wasn't it, when you first started working on the business plan?
Oh yeah, when I started working on the business plan in 2005, it was 1/4% of the market. So it was kind of crazy to launch a business selling books in a format that readers didn't want to buy, helping authors to publish that no professional publisher wanted to publish, and to do it all for free. To offer these services at no cost.
That means you're a visionary when you can see where the market is going. Wayne Gretzky says, skate to where the puck is going, not to where it's been. So that speaks to your vision. I'm curious because I love the fact that we're back in time in 2008 because there was so much going on. If you can remember Napster disrupting the music industry, you're disrupting
Yeah.
the publishing world. How did you guys kind of get together? Can I get a little bit personal and talk about you guys meeting, teaming up? Can you talk about that
You're gonna age
Well,
us.
a little bit?
that story goes back to, I think, 1993 or 1994. Is it
94.
93 or
94.
94?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had just left my job at a high-tech PR agency in Silicon Valley to start my own agency. And my first employee was my sister, Carrie, who still works for the company. And the second employee was this young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed guy who walked into our tiny little office wearing a suit.
I wasn't a student.
Yes, you were. It was a suit. Well, I'm no fashion expert, but you were dressed up.
Well, I'm looking for a job. What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
Anyway, go on with your story, Mark Coker.
Anyway, we loved Jim immediately, hired him, and Jim and I have been working most of our careers together.
Yeah, that's for sure.
How
So
did you
I've got
know?
mad respect for Jim.
What was
Likewise.
the point where you knew this is it, this is going to work? Where did you have that moment where it was like, okay, our idea is actually working?
So we launched in May of '08. By December of '08, we were selling a whopping $10 a day worth of books from the Smashwords store. Keep in mind, we weren't a distributor yet. So we were raking in $10 a day, and we were only taking about 10% as our commission. So we were making a whole dollar a day on our business that was burning a $10,000 a month hole in my personal savings. Smashwords was not venture backed. I was not rich, still not. Um, it was completely bootstrapped. And by the end of 2008, the business model was not looking good. But I had this epiphany. I was a little bit slow to this epiphany. The epiphany came in late 2008, early 2009, when I realized that readers don't go to Smashwords to buy books. No one had ever heard of Smashwords. No one trusted Smashwords. Readers went to bookstores to buy books. So we need to figure out a way to get our books into bookstores. So I started contacting, through my contacts, got access to some of the folks at Barnes and Noble and the folks at Sony. So Sony was like one of the original ebook retailers.
Yeah.
And to my surprise, both Sony and Barnes and Noble wanted all of our books. And I had to say, whoa, wait a second, you don't want all of our books. These are all self-published books of varying quality. We need to put some standards in place. And so the standard that we put in place was quality formatting. The book needs to at least be readable, but it was always really important to us that we were not going to be the arbiters of what's worth publishing. We were not going to be the ones to judge if a book is quality or not. We've always believed that the readers are the ones who should have that power, that the writers should have the power and the freedom and the agency to publish whatever they want, within legal reason, obviously. But it's the readers who determine what books are worth reading. And, even if your book has the potential to change the life of a single reader in the world, your book is just as important as a New York Times bestseller. And that was my attitude from the very beginning, that it is toxic to book culture and to books to value books only based on their commercial potential. I've always believed that if an author wants to publish that book, and that book is for a market of one, their grandchildren, their book of recipes, their memories, I don't care what it is, if that book is important to the author, that book is important to humanity and deserves to be published. And yet, in 2008, we were facing a situation where it was a print-centric world, where 99.5% of books were never going to be published. Those manuscripts were going to go to the grave with the author. And it just struck me as a cultural travesty. I just imagined all of these potential future not just bestsellers, but cultural classics that are lost forever. That human creativity and potential has been lost. And so I thought, wouldn't it be neat if just every book could be published that authors want to publish, and then let the readers decide.
Yeah. Well,
It can
and
be
a
good.
lot of authors too, their dream isn't necessarily for that commercial success. The goals in publishing that book might be, I want to have a legacy for my
That's right.
grandchildren. I want them to read my memoir about when I served in the war or when I went through this part of my life. Or it could be a business book to elevate their personal or corporate brand. So there's lots of reasons. I'm
Yeah.
curious though, did you envision the cottage industries that would pop up as a result? Because as authors began publishing their books, they did begin realizing, oh, wait, maybe I should have hired that copy editor like the big publishers do. So then you had editing becoming more prevalent, doing their own marketing, their own book covers, even their own metadata, their keywords. There's all of these things that go into it that the publishers do or did. And now all of a sudden you had all of these other firms. You say you came from a PR firm, but PR, knowing that industry myself, that's now a thing for authors. Did you envision or have any inkling that that was coming down the pike?
I did not imagine all of the cottage industries that we were going to spawn. At first, it was kind of a surprise. So, Smashwords launched into the market. We were all alone. It was just us and Amazon. And then you had all these major retailers trying to figure out, how do we launch ebook stores? Nobody knew what they were doing. No one knew anything about ebook distribution. Even the retailers were figuring it out. We knew nothing about ebook distribution when we decided to become an ebook distributor in 2009. But everyone figured it out. We just wanted to put authors in the driver's seat. We wanted to make them the center of publishing, give them the power to be a professional publisher, to make all the decisions for themselves. But it was, so shortly after that, we realized that we might have started this new gold rush. And my first impression was almost negative, because here we were offering a service, offering all these core essential publishing services at no cost and only making money on commission, just like a traditional publisher, just like the best traditional publishers. The money only flows to the author. That's what we wanted. And so shortly after we launched, we started seeing all these other companies, trying to glom onto the market and launching Smashwords copycats or doing what we were doing, but charging fees.
Yeah.
And so at first I was kind of like, whoa, this doesn't feel right, that it's all about the money now and trying to get money out of authors' pockets, because that's never what we were about. We were always about putting money in authors' pockets, giving them control, helping them sell. And only if they did well, only if they sold, would we make a penny. So there was a little bit of, suspicion and consternation at all these new services popping up. It created a lot of confusion in the marketplace. The world is so much more confusing today for the first-time self-published author than it was 15 years ago. 15 years ago, you only had a few choices. And if you chose one of those choices, Smashwords, Amazon, you weren't going to get screwed. You're going to do well. You were going to be taken care of. You weren't going to be exploited in a bad way like you would be from like a vanity press. But now, an author today, they've got a million different service providers saying, oh, yeah, we do what Smashwords does. We do what Drafted Digital does. And they don't always do that. Jim and I would go to writers' conferences, and, we'd have our little table there, and there'd be 5 other tables, and everyone's saying, oh, we do what Smashwords does. And the authors would come up to us saying, oh, that company there says they do what you do. No, they don't. What we do is very unique. Many companies have tried to copy it. Many have either gone out of business trying to copy it or have changed their model. at Smashwords and at Drafted Digital, it's always been important to our companies that the core essential publishing services that we provide, the ability to produce, publish, distribute a book, to monetize the book on your terms, all of those things that are under your control. We've always wanted that control. Both of our companies have always wanted that to be the control of the author. And,
Yep.
That's a unique mindset, this idea that authors should be in control, because, back when we launched Smashwords in 2008, there was this idea that a writer did not deserve to become a published author until they were blessed by a traditional publisher, because only a traditional publisher had the wisdom to determine which writers were ready to graduate to become a published author. And that was just nonsense to me, because, when we launched in 2008, it was also around the time of YouTube. It was around the time that blogging was becoming really big. And with our background in PR and in media, I was very aware of blogs and how even the professional writing community was somewhat suspicious of bloggers. How dare these amateur bloggers think that they can be a journalist or write or publish? But
Well, the
yet we
same
were
thing, that's
seeing,
true. I was just going to add on to that, Mark, and the same thing holds true in the publishing industry, where the rise of indie authors started to swell up in the publishing industry, and there were some people in the industry who kind of sat back and said, "Oh, look at these cute little indie authors thinking that they can publish a book and be successful." But then they started becoming successful, more and more successful, and then they started sharing this knowledge with their fellow authors. And that's one of the things that I love so much about this industry, and what I love so much about my job is, back in 2008, unbeknownst to us, we didn't just launch an indie publishing company. We launched a culture around indie publishing where authors are prideful to say, "I'm an indie author," because in the past, self-publishing was the option of last resort. But then as authors began making a mark and selling more books and then landing on bestseller lists, it became a mark of pride. And they started sharing this with one another. And they started teaching one another at writers' clubs, at conferences, in books and beyond on YouTube, how to do it and how to do it successfully. So it's the most fantastic community. And Mark mentioned control. And that's probably the number one advantage or benefit of indie publishing that I've heard from our best sellers throughout this decade plus now, is they love control. Not in a bad way, but they love having that 100% creative control and 100% control over their rights to do whatever they please with their books and with their author businesses.
Jim, that is exactly right. And you're exactly right that it's been indie authors that have pioneered many of the best practices of today of digital publishing. And many of these
100%.
best practices, even traditional publishers can't emulate because they don't have access to the same tools.
Yeah. And I'll add on to that. I remember probably about 2012 or so, meeting indie authors, especially some genres. Romance, for example, I think was one of the genres that really was able to capitalize on indie publishing because of the fact that their readers were just so voracious. It's not uncommon for somebody who reads romance to read 3 romance novels in a week. And they were maybe
At
just a
least.
little bit more forgiving. Yeah, yeah. And they just wanted the story. They wanted that escapism. We can get into the psychology, but then I remember meeting romance authors who were being approached by agents, literary agents. That's the dream, right? The literary agent coming to you, wanting to publish your book, and they're just like, I'm good. So that right there speaks to everything that y'all are talking about.
Well, so the indie revolution that happened would not have happened were it not for romance authors, and specifically previously traditionally published romance authors whose book rights had reverted back to the authors. So that was the situation in 2008. There was this huge supply of reverted rights works, mostly from romance authors, where the publishers said, look, you can have your rights back because we've exploited them. They're worthless to us now. So here you go. And so many of the first successful self-published authors were romance authors who were just republishing their previously traditionally published books. And they were pricing them at 99 cents and $2.99. And many of these authors were earning more in their first month of publication than they had during their entire publishing contract with a traditional publisher. Readers had never seen low-cost ebooks before. And it was the romance authors that, were first to hit the bestseller lists. And when that started happening, it opened the eyes to all authors that, yes, you can self-publish with pride, professionalism, and commercial success. No one can argue against commercial success. Now, Jim mentioned how very early on, when we first launched in 2008, the traditional publishing industry, and not just traditional publishers, but even the average writer, they would look at a self-published author and kind of think, oh, how cute. Aren't they cute and shiny? They want to be a published author. They're going to fail. And the success of the romance authors started changing those opinions. So, today we're to the point where you talk to romance authors, first-time romance authors. Many first-time romance authors now aspire to self-publish as their option of first choice, because they all have friends that are romance writers. The authors that they love to read, their favorite authors, are self-published. And there's something else, going back to what Jim said about control. Let me tell you why control is so important to authors. And I don't even think a lot of authors realize why they want this control.
They will.
Well, they will. We're going to tell them right now. When you control your publishing, you control your relationship with your reader. A self-published author, an indie author, can have a totally different relationship with their readers than a traditionally published author can, because the indie author controls that relationship. They control what they're writing, when they publish it, how they distribute it, how they price it. They control their promotions. If they want to do an exclusive pre-sale just for the fans that are subscribed to their newsletter, they can do that. Traditional published authors can't. And so this is really like the reader relationship management is on a completely different level for the author. So that's why the authors want control. It's about their relationship with their reader, because no one understands their reader better than the author. So this gives indie authors a competitive advantage in the marketplace. This is one of the many reasons that indie authors, when you ask them, why do you self-publish? What do you enjoy about self-publishing? They'll talk about the control and how they can do all these things for their readers. And, so, I share Jim's excitement. That's still exciting to me now after living this business for 20 years, including the few years before it launched. That's still really exciting to me.
Yep.
No one's going to love that book more than the author. No one's going to understand that book more than the author. That means that author is the best marketer of that book, the best representative of that book. That's how the magic happens.
Yep.
What do you think of right around this time period too, maybe a few years after 2008, then what you saw, at least from a marketing and promotional perspective, is a lot of the traditional presses then wanting to know what's your platform? You talk about email marketing. How many people do you have on your email list? How many people, back in those days, I think it was exclusively Facebook, but nowadays it's how many Instagram followers do you have? How many followers? Because then it shifted to where the publishing industry, the traditional publishers, were wanting that author to have built up a lot of their marketing platform even before they would consider publishing or traditionally publishing their books.
Right. And so a lot of authors, they think, if I have to go to all that trouble to do my own marketing, why shouldn't I be my own publisher?
Yeah, and I think a lot of those authors didn't even realize before they published that they were already astute. They already knew what they were doing on social media. They didn't realize how important platform was to traditional publishers before they started self-publishing. And we go to conferences and everyone talks about platform as like a measure of how many followers you have, but it's so much more than that. It's more of a measure of how much interactivity you have with your authors. With your readers. Because if your readers don't know that your next book's coming out, then your next book launch isn't going to be as successful. But if you have a captive audience of readers who can't wait to hear from you, they want to know when your next book is coming out. So you're not really cold calling them. You're not bugging them to tell them when your next release is coming out. They can't wait to get their hands on it to devour that next book of yours.
Exactly. Because once you've built up that platform, then the decision is, well, do I want to keep this to myself, or did I build up the marketing for a publisher to come in and take advantage of that? Not to say there's not.
I'm sorry, Desiree. Go ahead.
Just not to say there's not advantages with that, but please go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say there are examples of publishers who have signed celebrities because well, they're a celebrity, number one, but number two, they've got, I don't know, million plus Twitter followers, but then the book tanked when it was released because some of these followers, they're not necessarily readers, and just because you have followers doesn't necessarily mean that that they're going to buy and purchase a book. But your readers, on the other hand, your readers who are interacting with you and interacting with your author brand, are doing so not so much that they just love your books, but they love you, the author. That's why, to Mark's point, it's just so important that authors have these relationships with their readers.
And indie authors have the ability to build their readership faster than a traditionally published author can, because indie authors have tools that traditional authors don't have, like the ability to set your own price. An indie author can wake up tomorrow and say, all right, I'm going to make all my books free because I want to drive readership and I want to drive more people to sign up for my newsletter in my book's end matter. And so authors are doing this. They're making these types of decisions. Or I'm going to make my series starter free so I can drive more paid readers into the rest of my series. Traditional publishers still aren't kind of at that mindset yet. But, we're talking a lot about the advantages of indie publishing over traditional publishing. I should make really clear that we love traditional publishers too. We want traditional publishers to do well. They are an essential publishing option. In our view, every author from this day forward is an indie author, even if they choose the traditional publishing route. The great thing about publishing today, about authorship today, is that you have a choice. You can choose to go the indie route. You can choose to pursue the traditional route. You can also choose to do both. And many of the most successful authors are doing both. And so we support that. We want to encourage it. Yeah. And, someday we want to be providing services to those big traditional publishers as well, because we think we've got a lot of really cool tools that they need so that they can serve their authors better. We're all about serving authors. And if we can help any publisher serve their authors better, it's a win for us as well.
Yeah, pros and cons both ways. Could we shift gears and talk a little bit more about nowadays and that merger with Draft to Digital? Can you guys give us the lowdown on that?
Yeah, why don't you start talking about that, Mark?
Okay, so the merge was consummated in March of 22. I had conversations with Draft to Digital in years past, prior to that. And, they had broached the subject of joining forces. But, for most of the first decade that we were competing against Draft to Digital, I was pretty resentful, because this was just one of many companies that had taken my invention, Smashwords, and copied it. Mm-hmm. But I got to say that over the course of time competing against them, we eliminated a lot of our other competitors who just kind of fell by the wayside. We didn't have to do anything. They just failed because they didn't understand the model. But Draft to Digital didn't fail. And everything I saw from Draft to Digital just confirmed to me that they were following the Smashwords model better than anybody else was. The Smashwords model isn't just offering things for free. It's about the values that you bring to the author as a publishing service, the attitude that you have. So they manage, and it's worth saying that we talk about today and laugh about it, but when Draft to Digital launched 4 years after Smashwords, their mission was really simple. It was to create a better Smashwords. Now, obviously that didn't make me feel good as the founder of Smashwords. but I got over it. And so, life happened, the market evolved, and
He's not over it. Just kidding.
No, he's not.
over it.
Sorry, I'm so over it now.
I can see the trauma that I went through. I recognize it, and I am 100% on board with D2D. This is the best thing that's ever happened to our company, to our authors, and to the future of publishing and the future of indie authorship. I really believe that. When Chris contacted me, it was like around November of 21.
He's mentioning Chris. Chris Austin is the CEO of
Chris Austin, the one of the 3 co-founders of Drafted Digital. He sent me an email and said, look, I continue to think about how we could join forces to improve the lives of authors. He said something like that. And it was like, improve the lives of authors. Now, we've been contacted many other times by other people who are interested in acquiring Smashwords, but no one ever said, how can we make lives better for authors? I mean, that got right to the heart of why I started the company in the first place. And then he came right out and he shared something that private companies don't share with their biggest competitors. He shared Drafted Digital's revenues. Just offered it up, in the spirit of discussion here. And I was blown away by the numbers. It became really clear to me that Drafted Digital was doing a better job of helping their authors monetize our books than Smashwords was. And so it was clear to me I had to put all of my pride aside, because my job is to represent the authors first and foremost. We don't have a business if we're not taking care of our authors. And it became instantly clear in that first email that Drafted Digital was doing something that we were not. They had figured out a way to help their average author sell a lot more books than the Smashwords author. And so I agreed to start having the discussions. And I mean, almost immediately, once I met Chris and got to know him, and we talked about our values and what we wanted for our authors and why we were doing what we were doing, it was really just a love connection. It was clear to me that what they wanted for authors was exactly what we wanted for authors. Their vision for authors as the center of the publishing universe matched our vision. And, on top of that, Chris took the vision a step further. When I asked Chris, where do you see this business going? He said, I want to be the face of publishing. I want Drafted Digital to be the face of publishing. I want this to be the way that publishing is done, the way that authors want to do publishing. It's the D2D way, which is the Smashwords way, which is the author-centric, author first, authors in control, flipping all the compensation models upside down, so everything is, as much as possible, is going into the author's pocket. The author is the publisher. And we are just a service provider. We facilitate, we facilitate their publishing business. We provide these core essential services at no cost. We provide them tools that radically simplify the complexity involved in publishing. And, Drafted Digital's approach is the same way Smashwords' approach has always been. It's like you see an author problem, kind of like a firefighter wants to run into a burning building. We see authors facing problems and challenges, and often we see them facing challenges that they don't even know about yet. And we want to build free solutions for them so they can overcome that challenge, and they can so that professional publishing becomes more accessible to more writers, and to help the writers publish more professionally. That's why, when we talk about marketing, Drafted Digital, just like Smashwords, markets through education. When Jim is out there at conferences, he's not out there trying to do a sales pitch on Drafted Digital. He's out there educating authors on best practices that you can use at Drafted Digital, or you can take somewhere else.
Yeah. Jim, I'm curious as to your thoughts when in 2022 the merger was coming together. What was going through your head at that time?
When I first learned of it, I thought it was surprising because here was this competitor who was offering to acquire Smashwords. But then the more I spoke with Mark and I, when we get together to have our business meetings, it's usually on the hills above the Silicon Valley, just on a hike somewhere. So we had lots of time to talk about all this. And I could see how excited he was about it, and how his vision aligned with Chris's vision, like he already said. But when it all came together, you might think, well, these companies have been competitors for a decade, and they're going to have this culture clash when they finally do join. Nothing could be further from the truth, because our culture was already aligned when the companies joined. It was like we had been working together already for years and years and years. It was the smoothest transition. We never lost a single employee through that time. It's been a lot of fun. I think, I mean, my gosh, we're so lucky because our developers, you can imagine these two companies coming together. That I think Smashwords we have hundreds of thousands of authors in these accounts that are all coming from Smashwords over into the Draft to Digital system. And it's not easy because we've got this really robust technological infrastructure underneath it all, and authors and their books and their dynamic metadata and all this stuff. And we can't drop any of these balls. Like everything has got to keep going. So my hat's off to the development team on both the Smashwords side and the Draft to Digital side for not only working on this merger project, but everything else we have to keep doing on a day in and day out basis. Now, I should mention that the migration of Smashwords accounts over into the Draft to Digital ecosystem is almost complete. We expect to complete it at the end of this year. We're so excited about that because then the developers and our engineers on the Draft to Digital side, then they can put their energies back onto innovating new tools, new publishing and distribution tools. And then on the Smashwords side, we're going to focus all of our intention on making Smashwords the best bookseller that we possibly can. So it's an exciting time. I already said I love my job. It's a lot of fun, and it's just getting better.
So how far along are you in that migration process? How's the timeline?
80% complete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's coming next then? You're talking about focusing on other things. What's on the horizon?
Well, so when we're looking at the 20% of Smashwords authors who have not yet migrated their publishing tools over to Draft to Digital, most of those 20% are authors who had previously set up accounts both at Smashwords and at Draft to Digital. So they might have different books at different platforms. And so those are going to be more complicated to merge together. And that's what we're working on now. In terms of what comes next, so as Jim mentioned, Smashwords is going to become a dedicated store, a store only. It's worth noting that 2024 is on track to probably be the 8th consecutive year of sales growth at the Smashwords store. Now, anyone who's been in indie for the last decade knows that most major ebook stores, their sales have declined over that period of time. So the Smashwords store is bucking the trend. We don't know exactly why, but we suspect that the store is more indie friendly both to the author and to the reader. And we also think that there is a new reader that's kind of emerged. The indie reader, the reader who is not afraid to go out there and purchase self-published books from authors they may not have read before.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mark. And because one of our most recent partners is a company called Fable. Fable is a social reading app, but they also have an online bookstore, and it's over 45,000 book clubs now. And a lot of those book clubs are moderated and hosted by key influencers from Book Talk and Bookstagram and BookTube. And prior to us signing that partnership agreement, they were telling us that their members, they've got over 1 million members now, and the company only launched, I think it was 2022. They have over 1 million members now, and company leaders were telling us our readers, our members are clamoring for indie ebooks. We can't wait to sign this deal with you guys.
Yeah, it's worth noting that, indie books are now viewed as essential inventory at every retailer. And I mean, let that sink in for a moment.
Yeah.
Indies are now part of the essential fabric of publishing, of book culture. Readers want to read indie books. It's an exciting time that was only made possible by the true democratization of publishing, by allowing access to more writers to have a chance.
Yep.
Now, Desiree, you asked about like what's coming up next. Just to finish off on the Smashwords store. So as we shift more of our development into the store, we've got some exciting plans for the Smashwords store. We're going to introduce pre-orders in 2025. So Smashwords has always enabled pre-orders at other retailers, but we've never enabled authors who sell in our store to accept pre-orders from readers. So we think that's going to be a really exciting feature. We've also been redoing our payments and our payment processing infrastructure, and that's going to give some nice benefits to the authors down the line in terms of what we can pay them. We're going to reduce some of our costs there. So that'll be exciting on the store. And then we've got, big plans for all the other parts of the business, not just the Smashwords side, but, there's D2D print. So D2D print is Drafted Digital's fast-growing print-on-demand service. And it came out of beta just a couple years ago, right after the merge. And we haven't even, we've done nothing to market it, as Jim can probably attest. That's starting to change now, but despite the lack of any marketing for it, already 9% of Drafted Digital authors have used it. And we're seeing that attach rate go up every single month. So we're really excited about the potential for D2D print to make print-on-demand publishing more accessible to more authors. Because for most authors, it's still too complicated and too expensive. And so most authors don't do print-on-demand, and we think every author should. So there'll be, some exciting developments for D2D print next year. You should expect to see more formats, more print options, including hardcover, fabric, some other things.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. And then
I could talk a bit about. Oh, go ahead, Mark. Didn't mean to step on your toes.
No, go ahead, Jim. You know what I know.
Well, well, that can be argued, but anyway, I was going to mention that we didn't have enough to do with the merger of Smashwords and Drafted Digital. So last year we also acquired Self-Pub Book Covers, which was a decade-old pioneering marketplace for pre-made book covers. So we acquired them last year, and we are now in the process of modernizing that website and getting it ready. And we're going to launch it within the next couple of months as bookcovers.com. You can go to bookcovers.com and check it out now. There are already over 60,000 pre-made book covers, and these are from professional cover designers who have been out in the industry for a long time. So what we're trying to do is just modernize that website, make it more efficient, make the facility for authors to negotiate with these professional cover designers a lot easier and a lot faster. So look for that launch in the next couple of months. We're excited about that. Author email, an email newsletter service that Drafted Digital has owned and operated for years, but kind of kept it quiet because it doesn't have quite that polished sheen that we like to have before we put a new product or service out into the market. Well, author email is getting to the point now, it's almost ready for prime time. There are already tons of authors using it. So we can start talking about it a bit more now. It was built by authors for authors. And I think one of the things that excites authors the most is the pricing structure with author email. There's no free option. However, once you get to the point in your career where you've got 30,000, 60,000, 100,000 or more subscribers to your email newsletter list, it's only going to cost you $70 a month. Comparable services, they're charging hundreds, if not 1,000 or more for that type of service. So those are two more things that we're excited about.
I'm going to be talking to you about that offline, Jim, because yeah,
Okay.
I've gone through all of the email services, all of the platforms, and you're right. It's hard to find ones that really can cater to authors and their needs um, like that. I'm curious, guys. We still have a few minutes left. Looking ahead at the future, artificial intelligence is like this big elephant in every room. It's in the room of writing. It's in the room of book covers. It's in the room of children's books. It's in the room of editing. Thoughts on that? How it's going to be impacting your part of the world? What do you think?
Sure.
Uh, we have a ton of thoughts on this. So I would encourage everyone to go to the Drafted Digital blog. This month, Drafted Digital did a survey, an AI survey of our authors, um, to inform them about a trend that we see emerging in the marketplace right now of AI companies wanting to pay for licenses so that they can train upon book content to train their large language model systems. So we did a survey to ask authors how they felt about this opportunity. And the survey results were fascinating. And I would encourage everyone to go read them at the blog. So Chris Austin did a very detailed blog post, shared all the results publicly with everyone so we can see where the world is at. You know, basically what we found is that the author community is divided, almost right down the middle. About 49.5% of authors are unwilling to license their books for AI training purposes at any price. And then the other half are open to it at the right price. So that was really interesting to learn that. Um, we do see AI training rights as a valuable and new subsidiary right that's under the control of every author. And you know, already AI companies are starting to license other book content from the large publishers. Indie authors don't have a seat at that table yet. So we were basically asking our authors, do you want a seat at this table? Would you like the ability to evaluate some of these options? And so while there are a lot of authors that have no interest, there's a lot of authors who do. And so we kind of laid down the gauntlet and said, look, we're not going to enter this market. The market is not ready for us to enter it. There's too large of a chasm of mistrust between the author community and the AI companies. And let's be frank here. The AI companies have been screwing over the authors from the beginning by scraping their content off of the internet without any regard for author permission, author credit, author compensation.
Right.
And so authors rightfully feel violated. They see that these AI companies are investing billions of dollars to create systems that are going to create trillions of dollars of economic value for the AI companies and nothing for the authors whose content helped train these large language models. So that's just flat wrong. And our community confirmed to us that that's how they feel. Basically, 95% of the author community says that this is either a violation of my copyright or it's unethical. You know, at best, it's unethical. This is uncool. And so what I see in this opportunity here, you know, we know that the AI companies need to train upon book content. All right, it'll make their systems smarter, make their systems better at natural language processing. But authors, you know, need to be protected, and that protection needs to happen in the contractual stage. Authors need greater visibility over how their content's going to be used. Authors need to have the freedom, the power to say, no, I don't want my book used for training, or the power to say, yes, you can use my book for training, but only in certain situations. And you cannot use my books to generate other stories or to do things that I think would be competitive, either me as an author or to my author friends or to the writing community in general. And so, you know, it was, you know, really great to see our community give us feedback that confirmed how we were already thinking at D2D about this. We see both risk for authors and we see opportunity for authors. And our job at D2D is to create opportunities for our authors. So we do see an opportunity down the line to leverage our market leadership, our relationships, our expertise in designing digital distribution channels and supply chains. We see an opportunity for us to create an author-centric, author-friendly AI rights licensing supply chain that authors control, that publishers control. So authors are in control. And we think if authors can be in control, if authors have the power to say yes or no, or at this price and not that price, or for this application, not that application, we think we can bring the two worlds together so that authors can benefit and the AI companies can benefit and humanity can benefit. There is good stuff that can come out of this if people can work together in partnership, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Yeah.
Because AI companies right now are continuing to scrape and to train upon content that they know was stolen. You can go to Hugging Face and access a corpus of Smashwords titles that were taken from us 10 years ago without our permission. And it even tells you that these books were taken without permission, that these are the copyrighted content owned by the authors. Yet here's the corpus, train on it. You know, that's just crazy. And so the Smashwords authors who were affected by that have every right to be livid. They have every right to feel like their rights were violated. Even if copyright law doesn't say that that's technically a copyright violation, you know, that's kind of up in the air whether it is or not. But authors know it's wrong. And so for the long term, you know, AI is going to be with us for the long term. If the AI developers and the users of that AI don't want to have authors at their corporate headquarters, you know, with pitchforks, you know, screaming at them, then show some respect to the author community, show some respect to the creator community, to artists, and consider them, consider their rights, consider how you can help AI become a profitable, good thing for them, not something that's going to take away their career and take away their livelihood. And so the opinions around this are very heated. So that's just one aspect of AI is the training piece. The other aspect of AI is on the generation of books. And we're getting a lot of books coming into D2D that are obviously AI generated.
Yeah.
We don't like that. But again, it's not our job to determine what's good writing, what's not. But, you know, we think that, you know, most of these books aren't selling and they're not going to sell because the book that you're going to get generated from an AI system is likely going to be nonfiction. It's going to be generic, undifferentiated content. It's going to be 101 shopping tips or 101.
Yeah, very low content AI generated stuff.
People don't want to read that stuff.
Don't want it.
And then
but I do see it in children's books where the stories are very simplistic anyway. So I've even seen companies.
Certainly. Yeah. If you're looking to generate a bedtime story for your 5-year-old, your 5-year-old's not going to have the literary sophistication to recognize that maybe the story isn't very original. Maybe the story is like every other children's story. But so that's true. But when you're looking at, you know, full-length fiction, the potential for AI is still years and years away from producing books that are as good as the best fiction writers. But it is fair to acknowledge and recognize that, you know, for lower quality writers, you know, we are all on some spectrum of quality. You know, I'm certainly not at the best and I'm not at the worst. I'm somewhere in the middle. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. For those of us who are on the lower half of quality, however you measure quality or creativity, then these AI systems are going to present more competition. But, you know, at the end of the day, these AI companies can only generate written content that's as good as what they've ingested already.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that we found in our initial research into this space, into the AI industry, is that authors, when you ask authors, why are you opposed to AI or opposed to AI training? One of the number one things you're going to hear is that, oh, well, these AI companies, they just want to replace me. I don't want to be replaced by a machine. That is scary. No one wants to be replaced by a machine. But what we found is that there's a disconnect here between what authors fear and what the reality is. These AI companies don't really care. They're not looking to build businesses generating novels. I mean, sure, there's probably going to be an entrepreneur out there somewhere who's going to try that business. That business is probably going to fail. It's not a business I would want to start because these books lack human soul.
Yeah.
They're not real.
Exactly.
They're not the book that readers want to read. You look at what readers want to read. Readers aren't looking for a 2-star experience. They're not looking for a 3-star experience. They're looking for the 4 or 5-star experience. They're looking to have their worlds rocked, their perception of the world and life just changed and transformed, because that's what real human writing can do. No AI is going to do that, at least not in the foreseeable future. And so, writers should have a seat at the table to determine how this AI technology develops, so it develops in a way that is not harmful to writers. And so that's going to be our position. We're not going to do any deal. We're not going to present any deal to our authors unless we're convinced that it's fair, that it's fully transparent, so the author can make their own decision. It's not our place to say this makes sense for you, this doesn't. It's the author's decision.
Yeah, I agree. The reader wants to know that they're in the skin, the experience of another human being, not having the experience of a machine, I think is what it boils down to. Okay, we're running against the clock. My God, we could go on for another couple of hours, guys. But
Easily.
final thoughts. Anything we didn't touch on that you want to hit? And we've got just like a minute and a half left here. Jim, what do you think? Anything you want to add to all of this?
I think I would want to add that, authors who are maybe newbies to the publishing industry, it might feel like it's overwhelming to you at this point. Or you might feel, this is the part I hear a lot, Desiree, authors saying, oh my gosh, I missed the, not the gold rush, but I missed the best times to become a self-published author, because that all started in 2008. The best time was between 2008 and 2010. That's so not true. It's very, very early days right now. And one of the things that I love about this community, and I mentioned it earlier, is that authors in the indie community want to help you succeed. They want to help guide you along and hold your hand as you go through your career, your publishing path. There are so many writers groups out there, so many conferences, so many books to help you along, and a lot of those resources are free. But the bottom line is just know that you're not late. It's early days in indie publishing, and you too. You can get this. You can do it. You can have control over your publishing career. If you want to be successful, you can be. But it's going to take some work. But I have faith in you, authors. You can do it. I've seen a lot of authors do it.
Heck yeah. Mark, final thoughts.
Well, so trailing off of what Jim just shared there, I know there are a lot of authors out there that think the best days of indie publishing are behind them. Certainly the easiest days are behind us. Back in the early days, 2008, 2009, you could publish anything at 99 cents and you were going to get a lot of readers because readers had never seen a 99-cent book before. Today, you can publish a book and price it at free, and you're still going to get more readers than you would have otherwise if you had a price. But even free books now struggle to find readers. So I know that can be discouraging to a lot of indies, especially indies who see that it's more competitive now than ever before. But I still think that there's never been a better time to be a published author. I still think that the opportunity ahead of authors is greater than it's ever been. What I would encourage authors to do is really focus on best practices. So best practices are the things that you can do to publish more professionally. Best practices and focus on evergreen best practices. I wouldn't encourage you to look for the latest trend or flash in the pan. Get the basic best practices down first, because most authors fail at best practices. Now, Jim knows this best practice I'm about to mention. It's one of my favorite ones, and I'm going to mention it again. Pre-orders. Approximately 85% of indie authors release books without doing them as a pre-order. So that small percentage, that 15% of authors that do release their books as pre-orders, those 15% of authors are getting most of the sales. Like, it'll blow your mind, like 2-3 times more sales on average for books that are released as a pre-order, as opposed to books that are just uploaded when they're released. So this is a best practice that every author can implement today. If you are planning to publish a book anytime in the next 12 months, that book should be on pre-order today. It doesn't even need to be finished. You don't even need a book cover yet. You just need to know what the title's going to be and the book that you're going to write, that you're committing to your readers you're going to deliver in a year or 9 months. Get it up on pre-order today so that you can start collecting orders today. That's just one example of a best practice. So there's lots of opportunity. Don't feel discouraged that there's hundreds of thousands of authors that you have to compete against. Don't be discouraged that AI is creating tens of thousands of new books that are clogging retail store shelves. That stuff is invisible. Don't worry about it. Your competition is, how do you get to deliver that 4 or 5-star reading experience to your reader? That's all that matters. If you deliver that reading experience to the reader, your book will flourish on the wings of reader word of mouth. That's what it's all about. Word of mouth expressed by, readers sharing to their closest 20,000 friends on TikTok, this book that they just read, or, the 5-star review. That's also an expression of word of mouth. And that's what the author should focus on. That means the quality of your book is more important than anything else. Your book is the best marketing you're ever going to do. The quality of your book is more important than the quality of your advertising.
Yeah,
I could go on and on. I could go on and on about best practices.
I know that hook is going to come out and pull us off the stage here because we ran up against the clock. But we're going to have you guys come back, okay? Come back in the spring, and we can talk so much more about all of this. Mark and Jim, you guys are definitely, from Smashwords to Draft to Digital, you are helping authors become that power center in publishing. Thank you both for all you do, and thank you for being a part of the book.
Thank you, Desiree. And thank you, authors.
Yeah, thank you. Come work with us.